Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
First one is titled, I've done everything in my power to ruin my father's life. My father was always a violent and abusive person. As long as I can remember, I was the primary target of his outbursts. I have 3 siblings and often I would even be blamed and disciplined, even if it was impossible for me to have done whatever he was angry about. He was also a drug dealer and often had parties on Fridays and/or Saturdays with his mates who I'm pretty sure were only his friends to score free drugs and alcohol. One night when I was 8 years old, my father called me out from my room and there was a discussion between a handful of men and him about me. I won't get into too many details about the result of that conversation. All I will say is that from the ages of 8 through until 12, I was offered as an additional service. The violence was worse during this time than ever before, and this could be the fact I was getting older or what he was allowing to occur, I'm not sure. A couple months before I turned 13, I confided in my best friend's mom about what was happening after she noticed some bruising on my arms. She put me in her car, drove me home and confronted my parents. She came inside with me, got my things and we left. She took me in. I moved into a granny flat on my own about 18 months later and worked and put myself through high school, graduating second in my year, just a little brag. I'm proud of myself. For years after I left, my family were still very manipulative. They would steal money, threaten me for money, steal my possessions, etc. For a number of years I kept evidence of my father's racist and homophobic comments on social media. He also asked for me to destroy his fraudulent passport. He used to move countries not long after I did. He's been arrested for assault and he asked my mother to dispose of some evidence that would prove he used his photo with his brother's information to get a passport. I haven't spoken to anyone in my family for about 8 years. I always remembered the violence, but it wasn't until I was about 23 that I started remembering the rest. It's been an extremely hard few years since I started remembering. But I became very grateful for my survival instinct self. I've kept track of everyone in my family. I've become very good at keeping an eye from afar. But the main thing has been my father. I've catfished him and sent screenshots to his girlfriends. I've sent screenshots of the vile things he says online to his employers and he's lost jobs. I've signed him up for phone number subscriptions. All quite simple acts, until I stepped it up a gear. I contacted a local motorbike club who does work for abused children, etc. I showed them evidence I had of all his wrongdoings, including a few messages where he admits what he did. They've been sitting across the road from his house, following him to work, intentionally intimidating him. A year ago I took my evidence of his identity fraud to the police and he's been arrested and has been refused bail. Regardless of if he serves jail time here, he will be deported to our home country. So, I've been in contact with authorities in our home country and providing evidence. One of the men they've identified and arrested with what I've been able to give them. They're in the process of extraditing my father for the crimes he committed against me. While what he did to me, and allowed others to do to me, won't ever go away. I feel free now that he's not. I have a job I love, own a beautiful home and live a great life with my supportive and loving husband. Next one is titled, How My Ancestor Supposedly Took Down a Racist Businessman. This is an old story that have been told in my family for as long as I can remember. We're talking my grandfather was told it by his grandfather and so on. Note that this story has had close to 200 years to be embellished and twisted, so take everything with a grain of salt rather than scream, fake. Even if only a fourth of the story is true, it's still a great story. This is the story of my ancestor we'll call John, because that's the name I've always been told. John was a black man in America during the time when slavery was dying out, his grandparents having been brought there from Africa along with their children. John eventually was freed through some means. I've heard both that he paid his way out or the state he was in abolished slavery and he was freed that way, and found himself fighting in the Civil War because he felt it was the right thing to do. During the war he became good friends with a man only known as Mitch, who supposedly came from money but had joined against his parents' wishes because he believed in freedom for all. Again, grain of salt. The two were in the same regiment and made it through alive, though some relatives say Mitch lost a leg or an arm in the war. Fast forward to the end of the war, and John and his new wife Mary he'd met during the war used the money he'd earned to set up a small shop on the East Coast, most common city mentioned as Boston, in a small neighborhood. The shop became successful, John being a charming man and surprisingly savvy businessman. The neighborhood he'd set up in quickly growing as the city grew, meaning there were always customers who needed whatever it was he sold. I've heard everything from groceries to workers' tools. They lived happily and had 3 children together during the time, spending a decade there when suddenly, presumably accompanied by the roar of thunder and screeches of crows, Mr. Business arrived in town. Mr. Business has apparently been on the wrong side of the war and fought quite hard to keep his slaves, but was also smart enough to sell out other racists when he saw how the tides of the war were rolling, getting by with no losses except his free laborers. This had been the beginning of the end for his once successful plantation farm, as all the workers he could find to replace his slaves had wanted things like pay for their services. He'd struggled to find loyal workers that didn't charge more than the absolute minimum, and after a series of bad harvests had chosen to pack up, sell his land and head east to find a new source of income. He arrived and began buying up local businesses that seemed profitable and eventually found out about John's successful store. He was more than happy to discuss a fair price for the store, until he saw the skin color of the owner, that is. 10 years not enough time to erase a lifetime of institutionalized racism. He began harassing John to sell his rinky-dink store and find a farm to work on, don't quote me, offering way below the actual value, and when laughed out of the store, began trying to sabotage John's business. Getting thugs to throw rocks through windows, sabotaging deliveries, making a scene in the store. John soldiered on though, having grown tragically used to fighting against racism. He also had a lot of friends in the community who helped keep the store floating. Then it was that John's oldest son, who was 13 to 14 at the time, found himself getting beaten up heading home at night from his job, again, blurry details, and wound up with a lot of scars that he'd supposedly been stuck with all his life. John had had enough and, as luck would have it, had an out, having been contacted by his old friend Mitch. Mitch was starting up a farm, plantation in the west, south, southwest and needed loyal workers. He'd offered John a foreman position, good pay and a plot of land to live on with his family. This, dear readers, is when the revenge plan begins. John contacted Mr. Business, offering to sell at 75% what the shop was actually worth, and maybe because his other businesses hadn't worked out, he took it. However, John supplied the contract and proper solicitor to make things legal. The contract basically saying that after midnight of the date of signing, the shop and everything inside would transfer ownership to Mr. Business. Little did he know that that day up until midnight, the shop was having a massive clearance sale, selling everything not nailed down at ridiculous prices to a grateful neighborhood. When they closed up that night and mailed the keys to Mr. Business, there was little left to sell in the store, if anything. John never found out what happened next, as they left town soon after and never returned, but personally I'd like to think that Mr. Business arrived with his workers to an empty store with no deliveries coming, screaming and crying in the mud as he realized he'd been outsmarted by a lesser species. John and his family moved to work at Mitch's farm for the rest of their lives, John supposedly passing away in his 60s. Thank you for reading. Again, a lot of this is probably embellished, if not straight up a fairy tale, but my family all treat it as a true story, and I felt it was too good of a story to not share here. Next one is titled, The Best Revenge Story Someone Ever Told Me. I attended first grade at a super conservative private school. I'm only 5 days older than the cutoff for being in kindergarten, so I'm the smallest kid in class, smaller than even all of the girls. My parents thought about waiting a year to send me, but I'm told I was super smart and bored at home, which pretty much condemned me to never having a chance to compete for most sports teams. More good background info. I'm the byproduct of a teenage pregnancy. My parents got married to do the right thing, but because of that my dad works a factory job and money is super tight. I'm pretty sure in retrospect my grandparents were paying for the private school tuition. We lived in what would be considered a rough neighborhood and they didn't want me in the public schools. All of my clothes come from garage sales. I'm the stereotype of the kid who gets picked on in school. Little, poor, poorly dressed, nerdy. Despite that fact, most of the kids in my class were actually very nice to me. Like any school though, there are a couple of little sociopath bullies, even at 6 years old. The ringleader is Charlie. Charlie is big. Charlie is dumb. Charlie picks on me all the time at recess and during lunch. Lunch is in our classroom at our desks, but our normal teacher gets break time and some ancient old lady comes in to supervise. She never notices anything. Charlie has like every transformer ever. I have 2 GoBots. Charlie pushes me down at recess. He teases me relentlessly. He has a toady or 2 and they're smart enough not to tease me when teachers are looking. Charlie makes my life sort of miserable. The one time I told on him I got some BS from the teacher on the playground about turning the other cheek and the bullying just got worse. A few months into the school year, Charlie starts taking and eating things from my lunch. At this point in time, my favorite food in the entire world is spicy beef sticks, like a Slim Jim. Mom gets them from the little grocery store and butcher up on the corner. I know treats like that are a financial sacrifice for the family, but Mom loves me and puts one in my lunch every day. Charlie learns he likes beef sticks too and starts taking just that out of my lunch. Finally one day I tell my mom I don't want beef sticks in my lunch anymore. I can't tell her I'm being picked on, but she sees through me. Grilling ensues. I cry like a baby and tell her everything. I don't want her buying them so that Saab can just take and eat them. At this point most parents would call the school or Charlie's parents. My mom had to grow up quickly when I came along, and in some ways she just stopped growing up altogether. No way in hell she's going to call the school. Get in the car. Drive to the store. Pet food aisle. These will do nicely. Mom has a plan. We replace the beef sticks in my lunch with dog treats. Don't tell Charlie what he's eating. Not on the first day, not on the second day. Act normal. Act upset. Wait until he's eaten almost all of them. Day 1, it worked. Day 2, keep eating that horsey goodness Charlie. Like a week goes by. Finally it's Friday, today is the day. I put the bag of dog treats in my desk and make sure Charlie doesn't see it. Lunch rolls around. I wait until Charlie steals my beef stick and goes back to his desk. I wait until he's chewing on it. I pull the bag out of my desk and show everyone. I point and yell, Charlie's eating dog treats. The plan goes off perfectly like it's Mission Impossible. Charlie spits the half-eaten dog treat out on the desk and starts gagging like he's going to throw up. Some other boys start barking at him. The entire class is yelling and laughing and barking. Charlie gets up crying and runs out of the classroom. The old lady lunch monitor has no clue what just happened. She's only concerned some kid just ran out of the classroom and heads off to find him. The rest of us finish eating and go off to recess. I'm like a hero. I share the details of my heroic plan with other kids. No sign of Charlie all recess. Back to class. Teacher returns. Math or something. Vice principal comes in. The disciplinarian. The guy with the wooden paddle on the wall who will spank your butt for acting up. I have to go to his office. I'm about to burst out crying already, I'm so scared. My mom is already there. Charlie is sitting in a chair crying. Charlie's mom is there. It looks like he wet his pants and has thrown up on himself. Moms go into the office with the vice principal. Lots of yelling. I figure I'm done for. Mom comes out, tells me to go back to class. Charlie's mom comes out and tells him he's grounded for stealing and picking on me. Then she tells my mom it will never happen again. From then on Charlie is nice. Super nice. He even invites me to his birthday party. I gave him a GoBot. Last one is titled, Bully Revenge with Assist from Coach. So, this happened almost 40 years ago when I was in 6th grade. It would be just regular revenge except for the unexpected help from the coach. Cast of characters. Me, Buck, Bully, William, and PE coach, Coach. William was a kid who had flunked twice and was stuck in the 6th grade when he should have been in the 8th. He towered over the rest of us, and he thoroughly enjoyed any opportunity to pick at his classmates, stealing lunches or snacks or pencils, knocking over books, pushing you down, taking a swipe at you, etc. You get the picture. PE class was his special stalking ground. Our old PE coach kind of sat on the bleachers and barked at us a lot. Most days were just a free for all of kids running amok in the gym. Think tag, dodgeball, basketball, and more all going on at once. William could always make the best of it, going from group to group doing his thing. One day, he got in the middle of me and another couple of boys throwing a basketball around. He jumped in front of me and caught the ball. With an evil grin, he took a few steps back, wound up and decided to hurl it back at me at close range as hard as he could. Except, somehow, he threw low and I managed to catch the ball. His grin became a look of terror as I wound up and decided to hurl it right back at him. He turned to run, but my aim was true. I hit him right in the back of the head, a good hard lick. Hard enough to plant him chin first into the hardwood gym floor with quite a bang. Revenge executed. However, the commotion got everyone's attention, especially the coach. The one cardinal rule of PE was to not disturb coach's rest on the bleachers by making him actually have to get up. We were immediately summoned to his office for 2 licks, 2 hard swats with a paddle for those too young to have been paddled in school. Coach might have been old, but his licks were legendary, setting many young butts ablaze. His paddle was well worn with holes drilled in it for extra sting and intimidation effect. So, in we went. No other adult witnesses either. Like I said, it was a long time ago. He looked at William and growled, "You first, bend over." Just like that, whop whop, and a 13-year-old bully was bawling his eyes out. I hurt just watching him. My scrawny 11-year-old butt didn't stand a chance. He ordered William out. Pretty much the entire class was silent in the gym listening for the licks and to see the tearful aftermath. Coach looked at me for a few moments and then began to speak. He said, "Buck, I don't blame you for what you did. He tried to bully you around and it backfired, and William got what he deserved. I hate to give you licks for this since that goo-goo, Coach's go-to word for knuckleheads, had it coming. But, the whole class is waiting right now for you to come out squalling, and I can't have everyone fighting. So, here's the deal. I am going to swat this desk twice really hard. You walk out rubbing your butt." Yes, he talked like this to students, like it is on fire with all the tears you can fake. "If you don't sell it good enough, I have the real ones waiting." Do I make myself clear? I really didn't know what to say other than a weak, "Yes sir," since I wasn't sure if he was just toying with me. Just like that, he whaps the desk twice, and I walk out bawling and limping and carrying on. I am the class hero for the day for taking my licks standing up to William, but am pain-free. Pro-revenge, unexpected. Postscript. I never really had any more heat with William after that. I tried out for, and made, the school basketball team with Coach the next 2 years, and we had a good relationship. I got to see a human side that was not very obvious. He retired just a few years later and then passed away. I cried like a baby. William, in hindsight, had a rough home life not obvious to a naive 11 years old. His behavior was a reflection of that. He died young due to the things he just couldn't avoid cause of that tough life. While the revenge felt good, and I got a great story out of it, it is bittersweet to reflect on these memories and realize we all grow up too soon, some way too soon. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for listening.